Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Every now and then a story comes along where you look at it and go, really? This one is crazy. And I use that word occasionally. I don't think I overuse that word, but this one is out there in terms of what the police did to get a confession from somebody. And the shocking part is that the guy confessed to something he didn't do. And you might go, Steve, that is crazy. Well, that actually happens from time to time, and there's a reason for it, and I'll get there in a second. But the even crazier part is they got a confession out of a guy when the victim wasn't actually dead. And in fact, there was no victim. So Fontana, the city in California, pays nearly $900,000 for psychological torture inflicted by police to get a false confession. False confession. The man's attorney says, in my 40 years of suing the police, I've never seen that level of deliberate cruelty. The stories from the Orange County Register, a whole bunch of people sent it to me. Tony Saavedra wrote it. And, I've been practicing law for 33 years. And I often think, boy, Steve, I've been practicing law a long time. No. This guy's been practicing law for 40 years. So you can imagine if I told you I've never seen a case this bad in 33 years of practicing, it'd be pretty bad. 40 years, it's even worse. Within hours after the man called police to report his father missing, he found himself in a tiny interrogation room confronted by Fontana detectives determined to extract a confession that he had killed his father. And by the way, yes, the entire thing was captured on those cameras up in the corners. There's photographs, still photographs, there's video of all of this. And so I'm not sure the video is online. I'm sure it will be eventually. But the point is that these facts here are all basically admitted. This is all stuff that you can't argue and say, oh, maybe they're exaggerating. No. They don't pay $900,000 for nothing. The man had told the police that his 71-year-old father went out for a walk with a family dog, and the dog returned within minutes without the father. The investigators did not believe the story. And so over the next 17 hours, they grilled him to try to get him to tell them the truth. According to court records, detectives told the man his father was dead, that they had recovered his body, and he's now wearing a toe tag at the morgue. They said they had evidence that he had killed his father and that he should just admit it. He insisted he didn't remember killing anyone, but detectives allegedly told him that the human mind often tries to suppress troubling memories. At one point during interrogation, the investigators threatened to have his Labrador retriever euthanized as a stray and brought the dog into the room so he could say goodbye. And one investigator said, your dog's gone now. Forget about it. One detective said, how can you sit there and say you don't know what happened and your dog is sitting there looking at you knowing that you killed your dad? Look at your dog. She knows because she was walking through the blood. Were there blood stains in the dog's paws? And the dog knows? Like, seriously, think about that. They actually said, we're going to have to euthanize your dog, but your dog knows that you did it. So the man at one point in time was curled up on the floor with his dog, and he broke down and he confessed. He said he had stabbed his father multiple times with a pair of scissors during an altercation in which his father had hit him over the head with a beer bottle. And of course, none of that had happened. Now you might say, but Steve, how can the guy give descriptions with facts like that? But here's the thing. If you've been grilled for 17 hours and you just want it to stop, at some point, and they've done studies on this, people will tell the investigators what they want to hear because they just want it to stop. And there are some issues with respect to the man's mental state. But 17 hours, the average person could not withstand that without having some kind of breakdown. He was so distraught that he tried to hang himself after being left alone in the interrogation room. So they arrested him, handcuffed him, and transported him to a mental hospital for a 72-hour observation. Okay? Later that day, the truth derailed the detective's theory and their confession. The man wasn't dead. He wasn't even missing. It's just that his son didn't know where he was. The father was at LAX waiting for a flight to go see his daughter in North Carolina. But they didn't bother telling the man. So the attorney says mentally torturing a false confession out of the plaintiff here, concealing from him that his father was alive and well, and confining him in the psych ward because they made him suicidal. In my 40 years of suing the police, I've never seen that level of deliberate cruelty by the police. So they filed a civil rights lawsuit in federal court against the city of Fontana, alleging that police psychologically tortured the man and coerced a false confession without even first determining that the father had actually been killed. The suit was recently settled for almost $900,000. And by the way, a lot of these settlements are public simply because it's public money. So when we talk about the police paying this money or the city paying this money, well, it's taxpayer money going back to pay somebody off that the city employees wronged. But, but because of this and it's taxpayer money, many of these settlements are public record. So I have no doubt that that's correct. The man agreed to the settlement rather than take the case to trial out of concern that a jury award could be overturned on appeal. And they're worried about qualified immunity being raised, but that's not an issue here. Generally, qualified immunity protects law enforcement officers unless they violate clearly established law arising from a case with nearly identical facts, according to the Legal Defense Fund. But again, here, these facts are so egregious that, qualified immunity does not work 100% of the time it's raised. So sometimes when it's raised, it actually fails. And we've studied this, and one of the primary reasons it fails when it does is when there are facts that are so insane where people look at it and go, well, there is no other case right on point where they grilled somebody for 17 hours and then brought in his dog and started to kill your dog if you don't agree with us. The facts are so egregious that it's like there's got to be something there that violates clearly established law. So the Fontana police hadn't returned an email seeking comment by the time this story went to press, but the officers remain employed at the department who were involved in this, and it turns out there were 4. 3 of them still with the department. 1 has retired. So in court documents and depositions, police say they had reason to believe the man was lying. First, they said he seemed distracted and unconcerned during the 911 call, according to court records. They also said when they got to the house, the man's cell phone and wallet were still there. And of course, that seems odd. And the house was in disarray. The police said that they thought that was a sign of a struggle. But the attorney says that the house is being renovated by the father and son, and they had actually been arguing about that. Now, here's the interesting thing. I hate it when somebody says, I heard the person talking or I saw them, and they didn't appear to be concerned. Some people show emotion much more visibly than other people. And it has more to do with your personality. So when somebody walks up to a total stranger and goes, they didn't look scared, or they didn't look, how do you know? How well do you know this person? Okay? That's a problem. And so they said, well, he didn't sound concerned. He seemed distracted. Maybe he seemed distracted because his dog came back and his father's gone. And obviously he understood a few of these facts incorrectly. Perhaps the dog hadn't gone with the father. The father had just left and the dog got out. Okay, so there's clearly some issues here. But they say that a police dog sniffed out the scent of a corpse in the father's bedroom. And there were small blood stains in the house. The attorney points out that the blood stains were caused by the father's finger prick diabetes tests. And so he would occasionally have to prick his fingers to test his blood. And of course, that would get blood everywhere. Also, not everywhere, but you know what I'm saying. Also, they're doing renovations and remodeling on the house. Chances are that may have led to some blood also. So the lawsuit claims detectives also refused for several hours to get the man's medication for high blood pressure, asthma, depression, and stress. So he's got these medical issues. He needs drugs, but we need to talk to you for 17 hours before we get those for you, okay? So I'm not sure they had all 17 hours before they went and got him, but it did say several hours. So he became so distraught that during the interrogation, he was pulling out his hair, hitting himself, making anguished noises, and at one point tearing at his shirt while police encouraged him to confess. And that is according to a summary of the case written by the judge. The judge reviewed the facts and summarized it that way. The judge said he was sleep deprived, mentally ill, significantly undergoing symptoms of withdrawal from his psychiatric medications. And so the man needs medications for psychiatric issues, and he doesn't get it. And then guess what? He confesses to a crime that not only did he not commit, the crime never happened. At one point during the interrogation, investigators drove the man to get coffee and then to some housing tracts where he'd been looking to buy. Detectives berated him, insisting he did not need his medication and that they knew he killed his father, according to the case summary. "When can you take us to show us where Daddy is?" asked one of the investigators. Later, during the interview, the detectives told the man his father's body actually had been found already. So there's more to it than that, but that's the basic story, and it is mind-blowing. And so the man thought his father was gone. He thought he disappeared. Phones in a missing persons report, and the cops go, "Oh, he doesn't sound concerned enough. Maybe he killed his dad, and this is what he's trying to cover it up with." They grill him for 17 hours, don't give him his medication, and somewhere along the line, they bring in his dog and go, "We got to euthanize your dog. And by the way, your dog says you did it." Dog didn't say he did it, but they said your dog knows, which means that somehow they can know they know not just what's in your mind, but what's in your dog's mind. And I don't mean to find any humor in this, but you have to admit that's crazy. That's crazy. And so I wrote the book about Timothy Masters, and I worked with Timothy Masters on the book. And he's a guy who was accused of committing a murder when he was a teenager, and that was a real crime. But he had nothing to do with it. And they still prosecuted him for it, and he spent 10 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. But long before they arrested him, years before, they asked his father, "Could you bring your son into the police station? We want to talk to him." And the father was a real, law and order kind of guy. He goes, "Absolutely. Police want to talk to my kid. I'll bring him in." So they get to the police station. The cops go, "Mr. Masters, is it okay we talk to your kid alone? Is it okay?" Father goes, "Sure. We can trust the police, can't we?" They spent hours and hours and hours grilling a teenager about a crime he didn't commit, and he stuck to his guns. And it was amazing that after so many hours, at one point in time, one of the investigators, and we have video of this, by the way, so there's no question. At one point in time, one of the interrogators pulled his chair in really close, and at one point, even kneeling in front of Timothy with his hands on his thighs, getting really close to his face, going, "You did it. Just admit it. Just admit it." And Tim kept saying, "No, I didn't. And I did some research at that time, and I put it in the book, about how many times they've gotten confessions out of people who didn't commit crimes. And believe it or not, if you grill somebody for 17 hours who's not on their medication and do things like say, "We're going to kill your dog," and we've already found the body, and you're sleep deprived and you're hungry, you might confess to something that not only did you not do, that didn't happen. And that's the crazy part. And by the way, the fact that these 3 officers still have jobs to do this, they just cost the city $900,000. And by the way, and somebody will have pointed this out in the comments, but I'm going to underscore it for you, the money doesn't make it any better. You see, the courts can only award money damages, but they can't fix what happened. They can't undo what happened. And so to go through that kind of torture, this man thought for several days that his father was dead. The police knew the father was alive and didn't bother telling him for a little while. Let's just let him marinate on that for a little while. Why not? You'd think the moment they realized the father was alive, they'd go, "Oh, we screwed up, but we should go tell that guy his dad's alive." They didn't. So it is one of the craziest cases that I've ever seen in my entire life, not just on this channel, but in my entire life. And I remember reading this going, it's just sickening. It's absolutely sickening. And somebody's going to go, "But Steve, there's something strange going on here, where the father leaves town without telling his son he's leaving." Well, they said they had some arguments, but that happens. That happens. So Fontana pays nearly $900,000 for psychological torture inflicted by police to get a false confession for a crime that wasn't even committed. And his attorney says, in my 40 years of suing the police, I've never seen that level of deliberate cruelty. Tony Savedo wrote that for the Orange County Register. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law.
Meaning of reference manual. Object that raises the monitor to eye level.